We don't want to win. We want to triumph. When you win, it means you're engaged at the same level of the fighting. That brings us down to a level we don't want to be. We want to triumph. We want to become more than.
What do you make of it all? What do you see is happening? You've been talking about big changes for a very, very long time. Are we in it? Is this the time of transformation that everybody's been waiting for?
Well, you just scratch the surface with that list. Other than that, not much going on.
It was just the surface. CrowdStrike. I mean, what you name it, there's so
I
much.
know, I know. I'm just going to begin. I'm going to tell a quick story. I did. We all remember the craziness of 2012, and there was an East Coast commuter traffic radio talk show I did during 2012. It's a morning commute show, and I remember the interviewer saying to me, "What's the big deal about 2012? You guys made a big deal about it. Nothing's happening. When are all these changes going to happen?" And I interviewed with that interviewer again recently, and I reminded him of that conversation. And he said, "Yeah." He said, "When are these changes going to stop?" And I had to say to him, "We're just getting started." And you and I have talked about that behind the scenes as well. John, in the time that we have here, and because you have such a well-informed audience, it's one of the things that makes it really exciting for me to come and share this with our community. Uh, we're going to touch on, and again, this is unscripted. What I'd like to do, I'd like to touch on a number of different topics and weave them together to give a context for why America is so important in the world right now. You okay if we do it that way? If we just
You have the stage, my friend. Please do. Please do. You're a master storyteller.
Well, thank you for that. And this is a true story that we're going to be sharing here. Some of you have heard some of the things I'm going to say. For some people, have never heard any of this. And I just want to preface all of this, John. Everyone has a belief system that has worked for them. And I'm just going to look right in the camera, and I'm going to speak right to my family, to my community here. You all have belief systems that have worked for you, and we have to say they've worked because you're here. They've gotten you to the point where we are now. Those belief systems, many of them are breaking down. They're collapsing because they're unsustainable. And before we have a conversation like we're going to get into now, what I'm going to invite you to do is just in your mind, have a little mental file folder. It's just called possibilities right at the top. Just put possibilities. Everything you hear in this next 90 minutes or so, just drop into that file folder. It makes it really safe just to listen and embrace the belief system that has worked for you up until this moment in your life. And I'm going to say this, is the world is changing very, very quickly. And the moment that your current belief system fails you, when it breaks down, rather than struggle and trying to make it fit, I'm going to invite you to bless it, let it go because it served you. Come to this file folder, and I think you're going to be amazed at how well what we're going to talk about, what John and I are talking about over these next 90 minutes, how well they're going to serve you in your world. I do the same thing when I'm listening to new information. I'm a systems thinker. I'm a scientist. I'm a systems thinker, and I tend to look at the really big picture, and that's where I'm going to start right now. And John, you and I have had this conversation. We talked about it briefly on another podcast. Everything that we're seeing in the world today, bar none, is connected. It is related. We are witness. We are in the presence of a battle. It's an ancient battle that's been playing out since the first of our kind emerged on this planet 200,000 years ago. And to some degree, it was playing out even before we got here. It is a fundamental battle, and many people will position this as a battle between good and evil. And that certainly is happening. Good and evil is happening. The way this battle is playing out right now, it is a battle that is unfolding on two theaters. There's a battle for our planet, and a lot of people aren't talking about this. As a degreed geologist, I can see this happening, and I've been pushing back on it for a long time. There is a battle to geoengineer our planet into conditions that I'll just say it like this: they simply are not good for us as humans. I mentioned this in January of this year. I did a little experiment, and I plugged in all of the geophysical parameters that are the goals of the UN and the WEF. If we meet those carbon goals, if we meet those temperature goals, and I just said, okay, Greg, stop pushing back for a moment, embrace it. What would the world look like? So I ran this on a geologic time scale, and to my astonishment, John, what I found was the last time, if we were to meet those goals, the last time Earth reflected those parameters of atmospheric gas, greenhouse gases, global temperatures, the ice sheets, sea levels, all of those things, it was in the mid-Pleistocene period. The mid-Pleistocene was not a good time for life on Earth. Temperatures, the global temperature was about 10 degrees cooler than it is right now. Carbon dioxide levels were so low that the forests died. We don't want to go below 185 parts per million. That is a death sentence for our planet. During the Pleistocene, we were hovering around those areas. If we were to meet the goals that are being proposed, we would be in the 282, right around 280, something like that. And it's not like a little switch where you can fine tune it. It's dangerously close to where we don't want to be. A lot of extinction was happening. The forests died. The ice sheets covered most of the upper third of North America. Sea levels were higher. The bottom line is it wasn't good for us. It wasn't good for humans. And so then you ask the question, if it's not good for us, who's it good for? And why would we want to convert our planet into something that reflects that? And by the way, NASA just came out with a report. Earth is greener and lusher and healthier right now than it has been in 20 years. And that is counter to some of the narratives that are out there. And honestly, when Earth has been healthiest, it's been during the times when the CO2 levels were high. There was less ice, the oceans were higher, the temperatures were warmer. It's a problem for us today, for civilization, because we built civilization with a belief system that climate is static and that everything would always be where it is. Temperatures, sea level, ice would always be where it is. So we've got a lot of money and a lot of population invested in low-lying areas. But if you take that away, it's not a death sentence for the planet at all. So the question is, why would the powers that be work so diligently to the point that they are to push us back into a Pleistocene era environment? So this is that's a whole conversation that we could have. There's a battle for our planet. There's a battle for the population of the planet. And this is what we're really going to get into today. There's a battle unfolding. It's playing out every day in our lives. Good and evil is at the foundation of the battle. It sometimes plays out in a way that is kinetic, where we see action, armies against armies, and sometimes it is in a way that is non-kinetic. It's insidious because it is a psychological battle. I know you've talked about this, Sean, on your program. This battle is playing out. We all know there's a battle for our thoughts. There's a battle for our beliefs. There's a battle for our bodies. We've seen that play out over these last few years. But the battle I'm talking about is for something that is even deeper than that. There is literally a battle for our very humanness, because it is through the human body in this world that we access a force that is so rare and so precious and so beautiful and so powerful that organizations, people will go to any length to veil that power from us. Nations have gone to war against nations to distract us from this power that lives within us. It's happening now. Armies have defeated armies. Societies have been leveled. Financial systems have been collapsed. Climate has been engineered. Diseases have been unleashed. Lies have been told and they've been accepted, all in an effort to keep us distracted so that we are veiled from the essence of this force and this power that is within us. Now, we mentioned this briefly in another podcast. Some of you may not have been with us. So the force I'm talking about is a force that is human divinity. When people hear the word divinity, they often think of religion. And I can see why, because there are schools of divinity, and it is often linked with divinity, religious traditions. But when you look at the definition, it's really interesting, John. The definition of divinity, it is the ability to transcend perceived human limitations. That's all it is. Transcend means to become more than, not just survive, to become more than, and perceived limitations. They may not even be real limitations. They're the limitations that we placed upon ourselves. So what is at stake? And this is where the good and evil comes, the role of good and evil, because evil has always wanted to veil our divinity from us, to keep us locked into an illusion of being powerless, and an illusion of needing something outside of ourselves. Well, that theme has played out throughout the ages through whatever technology has been available, and uh, whatever language, whatever uh, you know, thinking has been available in societies during that time. So we're seeing this continue right now. We are seeing this battle intensify because we are narrowing a window of time right around that 2030 timeframe. And the powers that be are jockeying for position, and they're jockeying for power. They don't care about money. They've got more money than they're ever going to spend. They don't really care about their personal power. What they're looking at is control. And this is the other half of the equation: the battle for our planet and the battle for us, for our humanity, that allows us access to our divinity. Why is divinity so powerful? It's because it's divinity that frees us from fear. And fear is the most powerful commodity that anyone can have when you are in a battle for control, when you're in a battle to subjugate a population. Fear. If that population is no longer in fear, then they are less vulnerable to the visions and the agendas and the ideas of others. And we all know there are multiple competing, this isn't anything anybody doesn't know, there's multiple competing visions, multiple competing agendas for what our world should look like. This is the context. Everything we're seeing, and I am seeing even friends in our close circles, other authors. I'm going to honor them. I certainly don't want to mention any names, but people in the circles that we are familiar with and whose information we've read, the books we've read, videos we've seen, that believe that everything I just said is separate from what's happening in America today, or everything I've said is separate from what's happening in the world today. Well, there's an intensification for this battle because we are just a few short years from this 2030 window. And by the way, this is still part of the 2012 phenomenon. When I wrote the book, it was a book called Fractal Time, and I released it in 2010, 2 years before the 2012 phenomenon. I want to give people a heads up. And in that, I identify this phenomenon when a cycle of any kind, a cycle in a human relationship, a marriage, a cycle of health, a cycle of abundance in finance or jobs or cosmic cycles. It's the same thing. When they end, they don't end on a dime. There is a buffer, a window between the time that one cycle winds down and the other one winds up. And there is a factor, a mathematical factor that you can apply to the length of the cycle. If the cycle is 20 years or the cycle is 5,000 years, you apply this mathematical constant and it will tell you the buffer. We talk about that in the book. Well, the buffer for the year 2012, interesting, it's a 36-year long buffer for a cycle that's 5,125 years long. 36 years, 18 years before 2012, 18 years after 2012. And of course, that 18 years after is the year 2030. It also happens to coincide with some cosmological events incoming. A dear friend of mine, dear brother, before he passed, his name was Paul LaViolette, and he was writing about the volley of cosmic radiation that shoots through our universe at very specific intervals of time. And sadly, his work, he didn't see the acceptance during his lifetime that it is now receiving. One of those volleys, you can't nail it to a day or a month, but one of those volleys is a factor of the 5,000 year cycle and the 26,000 year cycle of our precession, the equinoxes. So, all to say, there are things converging on the year 2030. The powers that be know that. They're jockeying for position, they're jockeying for power to be in the best place in a number of parameters when that happens. So, good and evil. Sometimes it is a philosophic battle, sometimes it becomes kinetic. What we saw in Israel on October 7th, I was in London the day that it happened, and I saw the raw footage before it started being edited by the networks. And it wasn't about Israelis and Palestinians. This was pure evil that was unleashed in a way that I never thought that I would see in my lifetime. It's not allowed to be seen or even to be known in the United States. Social media platforms won't allow it. Community guidelines won't allow it. Now the mainstream narratives won't allow it. But it was an example of evil rearing its ugly head in a very kinetic manner. Well, the way this battle is being fought is through an insidious kind of warfare that now has been given a name. It's called fifth generation warfare, 5Gen or 5G warfare. And this isn't 5G in terms of cell phone towers, 5G or fifth generational
Well,
warfare.
let's just include it for shits and
Well,
giggles.
well, it is. It's
Yeah,
part of that.
I now
And
know. Yeah,
yeah, and the fifth generation warfare, it is especially insidious warfare because it is a psychological form of warfare. It is an emotional form of warfare that may precede a kinetic warfare. You know, when you think about it, kinetic wars happen because people believe in those wars, or the powers that be believe there's a need for them. All of that is based upon the way we've been taught to think. And what's happening right now, I know it's happening, and I'm still in awe of how efficient it is. And John, you've nailed this. And I haven't seen every one of your podcasts. I've seen you talk about this enough. Is that the psychological warfare that is happening in the world through social media, and America is leading the charge on this, is the powers that be know that to meet the goals for this 2030 series of events, America, as America has been in the past, cannot be allowed to exist because the freedoms that we have been given as a nation, and I'm going to talk about these quite a bit here in just a moment, those freedoms are so rare, they are so precious, and they are so empowering that if the population is allowed to exercise those freedoms, that the visions and the agendas for this 2030 convergence, they can't happen. America, I've actually heard it called the problem of America because we
hmm
stand in the way. We
yeah,
are the last bastion of these freedoms. Uh, they know that America, it would be, it would make no sense to try to impose from the outside the changes because Americans would resist.
and with
Americans,
force, and with
exactly.
force.
Yep, and Americans are very passionate about their beliefs, even if the beliefs are wrong. Very passionate about what those beliefs are. So this is where it gets really insidious, John. Is that there's an intentional effort. So we're looking at the planet and geoengineering on that side. Now we're looking at the social engineering and the population on the other side, all under the guise of this battle, this ancient battle, couched in good and evil. The way that this battle is being waged is to destroy America from within. And it is happening in a way, and I'm not saying that everyone who is involved is even aware they're involved. Many in the layers of power are pawns. Some of them are well intentioned pawns. They don't know because they're looking here, they're not looking at the big picture. This is where systems thinking comes in. So there is a concerted effort to break the social bonds that have kept America together as a union in our diversity so successfully for such a long period of time. And I know if you're watching this, you probably say, well, what kind of bonds are those? It's been happening for a while, but it kicked into high gear right around 2011, uh, when the battle between the rich and the poor, Occupy movement, the 1% and 99%. Here's where it gets so insidious, is because there is a discrepancy. It does need to be discussed. It can be remedied, but that's not what happened. The discrepancy was weaponized to divide us rather than allowed to be the catalyst to bring us to a closer union. And we all said it's still happening. It's still happening today. And then that was followed with the weaponization of the differences between men and women and the Me Too movement, an important movement, a conversation that needed to be had. We still need to have this. But rather than using that to bring us together in a kind and compassionate way, it was weaponized to drive us apart and create more hate. The same thing between blacks and whites, and Christians against Muslims, and Jewish against Muslims. And now it's happening between men, women, adults, and children. The lines are being blurred. The lines between gender are being blurred. The last bastion that we have now is our religious beliefs. And now the religions are breaking down. And John, you've done a beautiful job talking about why that is and where that comes from. The point is that the things that we've always believed in the past and the beliefs that have held us together as a union are intentionally being destroyed. Those bonds are being broken. And when there's nothing left to believe in, when all of our belief systems, now our trust in our own government, our trust, we don't know what's happening with our president. We don't know what is happening with this election that's coming up. We all have suspicions. We have bits and pieces. But this is the point. It's the suspicion that destroys, the lack of trust that destroys not just the nation, that's happening at the dinner table between kids and their parents, or between a husband and a wife, because the information silos that have been designed to keep us isolated in our personal echo chamber of what we believe to be true. It is reinforced through the algorithms to the point where what we see, we think is true, and the person next to us believes that what they've seen is true, and they're so passionate about it. This is how you destroy a nation, and it's how you destroy a society. It's how you destroy families. Ultimately, it's how you destroy a species, because part of this is that we're being conditioned to believe that we're a weak, flawed, powerless species, and that makes us victims. And as victims, we need a savior. And our savior is being touted as technology that we embrace and allow into our bodies, not just in the world around us. We're being persuaded, convinced, in some cases mandated, to accept technology into our bodies. And here's where this changes, John. We've never seen this before. Always in the past, the changes that we've been asked to embrace were reversible changes in the world around us. And what's happening now is we're being coerced, mandated, invited, convinced, persuaded to accept technology into our bodies that cannot be reversed and changes forever the world within us. When we change our biology, we change our ability to access our divinity. There are biological reasons for that. There are chemical reasons, and there are reasons of physics and electromagnetics that we can get into. The point is that we are all we're all part of this. We're all part of what's happening on levels that we may or may not be aware of. This is the context, and it's within that context, I believe, that America was founded a little over 200 years ago by individuals. They didn't know perhaps the exact date, and I don't think they knew the technology, but they knew that the world would need a nation with the freedoms to be able, and I'm going to use this word very, very consciously. We don't want to win, we want to triumph. When you win, it means you're engaged at the same level of the fighting. That brings us down to a level we don't want to be. We want to triumph. We want to become more than the challenges that face us. Our divinity, human divinity, is the key to triumph over evil in this world. It is the key to triumph in everything that we're talking about. America is the last bastion of the freedoms that allow human divinity to flourish. And that is why the focus is on America right now. You're watching in real time. We're all living it. We are all casualties of fifth generation warfare. We are all casualties to some degree of the information silos and of the AI and the deep fakes. You don't really know what's true anymore and what's not. You have to really work to see a lot of diverse information and arrive at some consensus, knowing that even that consensus is probably not 100% true. So we're all casualties. But I want you to know what you're seeing happen in America is real time. It is because America is the last bastion for human divinity to flourish. And you aren't going to hear many people say that. You can look at it as Democrats or Republicans and you get lost in the weeds. And you can look at it as MSNBC against Fox News, or you can look at it as one candidate against the other. It's all important. It's all happening. It affects our lives. But I want you to keep in mind, ultimately, this is a fundamental battle between good and evil. It is a battle to preserve our divinity. And if you are asking how to make a choice, when you're given whatever choices you're given, which choices will allow you to have greater freedoms and deeper access to your body and to your own divinity. And that will inform you in terms of what kind of choices and the consequences of the choices that you're making. So, John, I'm going to stop right there. I wanted to lay that out, and we can tie into this. I want to talk about the founding of America.